The airplane cabin buzzed with the usual chatter as passengers settled in for a smooth daytime flight. Sunlight streamed through the oval windows, painting the aisle in warm gold. My wife, Emily, smiled as she took her seat beside the window, her favorite spot. It was a simple pleasure, something she always looked forward to, but that peace shattered in an instant. A loud, sharp voice sliced through the calm. "Excuse me, that's my seat," barked a woman with perfectly curled hair and a sour expression. Emily politely showed her boarding pass, explaining it was indeed her assigned seat. But the woman, a classic Karen in every sense, refused to back down. With everyone watching, she huffed, cursed, and in a shocking move, grabbed her coffee and threw it right at my wife's face. The hot liquid splattered across Emily's blouse, and gasps filled the cabin. Flight attendants rushed over. Passengers recorded the scene, and I, sitting just across the aisle, froze. My wife looked stunned, trembling, and I could feel my anger boiling. Karen snapped, "Maybe next time you'll learn not to take other people's seats." She had no idea who she was talking to. You see, I wasn't just any passenger. I owned the airline, in fact. I owned 62 airports worldwide, and she had just assaulted my wife. In my sky, on my plane. She thought she was untouchable because she was loud. She had no idea she'd just picked a fight with the man who signs the paychecks of every employee on that aircraft. That coffee wasn't just a stain, it was the beginning of her downfall. The morning sun poured through the giant airport windows, casting warm light on the bustling crowd of travelers hurrying through the terminal. It was one of those perfectly calm travel days, clear skies, no delays, and the soft hum of rolling suitcases echoing across the polished floors. My wife, Emily, and I had arrived early for our flight from Chicago to San Diego. She had her usual bright smile, the kind that could calm my busiest days. "Window seat again?" I asked, teasing as I handed her the boarding pass. "Of course," she said, grinning. "I can't fly without watching the clouds. It's the best part." That was Emily's simple joys made her happiest. While most people complained about cramped legroom and airplane food, she always found magic in the view. Every flight was an adventure, not just a means to an end. She'd press her hand gently on the glass as we rose above the earth, tracing the horizon like she was painting invisible lines in the sky. The gate attendant called for boarding, and we joined the line. Emily wore her favorite cream cardigan and had her hair tied back in a loose bun. She looked peaceful, unaware of the storm about to walk into our day. We stepped onto the jet bridge. The smell of jet fuel, faint but familiar. Inside the cabin, sunlight streamed through the open windows, glinting off the polished tray tables. The hum of the air conditioning mixed with the chatter of passengers settling in. We found our seats easily, row 14, seats A and B. Emily slipped into the window seat and smiled. "Perfect," she whispered. I placed our carry-ons in the overhead bin, took the aisle seat beside her and checked my phone. Everything was running on time. The crew moved smoothly through the aisles, greeting passengers, helping with bags, offering smiles. It was just another day in the sky. Or so it seemed. That's when she appeared. The woman came marching down the aisle like she owned the aircraft. She had sharp eyes hidden behind oversized designer sunglasses, a leopard print scarf, and a perfectly styled haircut that looked like it took hours to achieve. Her perfume, strong, floral, and expensive, filled the air even before she reached us. She was muttering something under her breath about unorganized staff and incompetent boarding procedures. I noticed how the flight attendants forced polite smiles as she passed, the kind you give when you'd rather not engage. Emily, always the gentle soul, didn't even notice the incoming storm. She was too busy taking photos of the wing and the bright sky outside. The woman stopped abruptly beside us and looked down at Emily with an expression of pure disbelief. "Excuse me," she said, her tone dripping with arrogance. "I believe you're in my seat." Emily turned, blinking, a little startled but still smiling. "Oh, I don't think so," she replied kindly. "This is one for A. It's right here on my ticket." She reached into her purse and pulled out her boarding pass, offering it politely. The woman didn't even glance at it. "Well, that's strange," she huffed. "Because I always book the window seat, always. So there's clearly been a mistake." I looked up from my phone, feeling the tension starting to rise. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "perhaps you should check your ticket." The woman sighed, dramatically, rummaged through her designer handbag, and finally produced her boarding pass. She glanced at it and frowned. 14C, she said, as if the letter itself offended her. "That can't be right. I always get it." Emily smiled again, somehow still patient. "It happens," she said softly, "but that one's just across the aisle." The woman's lips tightened. "I don't sit in aisle seats," she snapped. "Too much traffic, people bumping into you. I paid good money for this ticket." Her voice was rising now, and passengers nearby began to glance over. A flight attendant approached, her calm professional smile barely hiding her wariness. "Is everything all right here?" Before Emily could answer, the woman jumped in. "No, it's not. This young lady has taken my seat, and I expect her to move immediately." The attendant looked at both boarding passes. "Ma'am," she said gently, "your seat is 1 for C, just on the other side. 1 for A belongs to this passenger." The woman rolled her eyes. Well, can't you just switch it? It's not that hard. Give her my seat. The attendant shook her head. I'm sorry, but we can't make changes after boarding has begun. Perhaps you could kindly take your assigned seat. The woman huffed loudly, muttering something about useless staff, and stormed across the aisle. She sat down heavily, muttering under her breath about people with no manners. Emily gave a nervous laugh and whispered, "That could have been worse." I nodded, though something told me the story wasn't over. As the rest of the passengers boarded, I noticed the woman kept glancing our way, glaring, really as if Emily had personally offended her existence. She made a few exaggerated sighs, adjusted her scarf noisily, and even complained to another passenger about people who steal seats. Emily just looked out the window, choosing peace over drama. That was her way. When the cabin door finally closed and the captain's voice came over the intercom, the atmosphere settled. The flight attendants moved through the aisle for the safety check. Everything seemed fine again. The engines began to hum and the plane started to taxi toward the runway. That's when the woman's voice cut through the cabin once more. Unbelievable. She muttered loudly, "I can't even see out the window from here." She leaned forward, peering past another passenger, clearly irritated that Emily had the better view. Some people just don't know how to appreciate what they don't deserve. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. Emily gave me a reassuring look, as if to say, "Let it go." But I couldn't ignore the simmering anger building in the woman's eyes. She wasn't done. Not yet. A few minutes later, as the plane reached the runway and prepared for takeoff, the flight attendants began their final checks. The woman reached for her coffee cup, one she'd gotten from the gate earlier. She stirred it aggressively, her rings clinking against the cup's edge. I caught her glancing toward Emily again, muttering something about entitled people. Emily turned slightly toward me, whispering, "Do you think she's okay?" I gave a quiet chuckle. "She'll calm down once we're in the air." But I was wrong. Just as the engines roared and the plane began to move, the woman stood abruptly, startling everyone nearby. "I can't take this anymore," she shouted. "That's my seat. Ma'am, please sit down." The flight attendant called out, but before anyone could react, she lifted her coffee cup and in one shocking, deliberate motion threw it. The hot coffee arced through the air and splashed across Emily's face and blouse. The cabin gasped. Emily froze, eyes wide in disbelief, coffee dripping down her chin. "Maybe next time you'll learn to respect other people's seats," the woman barked. I stood up so fast my seatbelt clattered against the armrest. My heart pounded, fury rising like fire in my chest. The flight attendants rushed forward, voices firm but calm. "Ma'am, that's enough." Passengers stared, phones already recording. The once peaceful cabin was now filled with whispers and shock. And as I looked at my trembling wife, something inside me shifted. That woman had no idea who she had just thrown coffee at, and worse, whose wife she had just insulted. Because this wasn't just any flight. This was my airline, and she had just declared war at 30,000 feet before we'd even taken off. For a long, breathless moment, the entire cabin froze. The steady hum of the airplane's engine seemed to fade, replaced by the stunned silence of disbelief. Emily sat motionless, her eyes wide, her hands trembling slightly as the hot coffee dripped from her chin onto her cream-colored cardigan. The brown stain spread slowly across the soft fabric, the smell of burnt bitterness filling the air. The woman, the one who had thrown it, stood there with her chest heaving, clutching her empty cup like a weapon. Her lips curled into a self-satisfied smirk. "Maybe next time," she spat, "you'll learn not to take what isn't yours." The audacity of her words cut through the shock. I felt my entire body tighten with anger. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stood up, my voice low and controlled, though every part of me was burning. "Sit down," I said, my tone colder than the air conditioning. She blinked, momentarily startled by my composure. "Excuse me." "Sit down," I repeated, this time with steel behind the words. The flight attendant nearest to us, a young woman named Jessica, rushed forward, her training instantly kicking in. "Ma'am," she said, forcing calm professionalism into her voice, "you need to take your seat immediately. That behavior is unacceptable." Karen, because there was no better word for her, crossed her arms and glared at Jessica. "Unacceptable? What's unacceptable is her taking my seat. I told you people earlier there was a mistake, but nobody listened to me." Jessica's tone hardened. "That doesn't give you the right to assault another passenger." The woman scoffed. "Assault? Oh please, it's just coffee." She dry off. I stepped closer, my voice measured but unmistakably angry. "You threw hot liquid at my wife. Your wife should learn some manners," she snapped. I could feel passengers shifting in their seats, watching closely now. Some were recording on their phones. A man across the aisle shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable." A mother near the back pulled her child closer, whispering something about some people having no shame. Jessica called for backup through her radio, her voice shaking slightly now. Within moments, 2 senior attendants arrived, one of them the head flight attendant, Robert, a tall man with a calm but commanding presence. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked, though his eyes had already taken in the scene: the stained cardigan, the furious passenger, and the cup still clutched in Karen's manicured hand. Jessica explained quickly. Robert's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, he said to the woman. You need to come with me to the front of the plane. Karen's mouth fell open. What, why? I haven't done anything. You assaulted another passenger, Robert replied flatly. We will not be taking off until this is resolved. Please gather your belongings. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A few passengers even clapped quietly. But Karen, instead of feeling shame, only grew more defiant. This is ridiculous, she shouted. I paid for this flight. I have rights. You also have responsibilities, Robert said firmly, and one of them is not to endanger or disrespect others. She looked around for support, but all she saw were cold stares and shaking heads. Emily was dabbing her cardigan with tissues provided by a kind elderly woman sitting behind us. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was soft but steady. I don't want to cause more trouble, she whispered to me. I bent down beside her. You didn't cause this, I said quietly. She did by now. The captain had been informed. The plane, which had been slowly rolling toward the runway, halted. The captain's voice came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a short delay due to a passenger issue. Please remain seated. We'll resume shortly. The words passenger issue did little to hide the gravity of what had happened. People murmured among themselves, casting disapproving looks at the woman still standing defiantly in the aisle. Finally, Robert motioned again. Ma'am, please come with me. If you refuse, we'll have to involve airport security. That got her attention. Her face paled slightly, but she still tried to keep her voice strong. Fine, but I'll be filing a complaint, and believe me, this airline will regret it. I almost smiled at the irony. As she gathered her bag and stomped toward the front. A few passengers couldn't help but applaud. Someone even muttered, good riddance. The woman turned sharply, glaring at everyone like a villain in a courtroom drama, then disappeared behind the curtain separating the economy cabin from the galley. Once she was gone, Jessica turned to us with genuine concern. Sir, ma'am, are you both all right? Emily nodded weakly. I'm fine, just a little shaken. Jessica offered her a clean napkin and a sympathetic smile. We're so sorry this happened. We'll make sure it's handled properly. I nodded, still tense. Thank you. As the attendants went to report the incident, the passengers began to whisper again. The man across the aisle leaned over. She threw coffee at your wife. Some people are unbelievable. Yet, I said, forcing a polite smile. Unbelievable is one word for it. The plane sat idle for about 20 minutes as the situation unfolded. Through the small crack in the curtain, I could see the woman gesturing wildly at the staff. She was clearly trying to talk her way out of the consequences, her hands slicing through the air in angry movements. Then, the cabin door opened again. Airport security, 2 officers in navy uniforms boarded the plane. The whispers rose again like a wave. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert announced, we apologize for the delay. A passenger will be escorted off the aircraft due to disruptive behavior. Thank you for your patience. Karen's voice carried through the cabin even before she appeared. You can't do this to me. I'll sue this airline. The officers remained calm. Ma'am, please step off the aircraft voluntarily. Her heels clacked sharply against the floor as she was escorted out. For a fleeting moment, she glanced back toward us, her eyes narrowing. You'll regret this, she hissed. Emily looked down, still shaken. I stared back at the woman, silent but steady, until she disappeared through the door. When the door finally closed behind her, the entire cabin exhaled as one. A few passengers even clapped softly again, a quiet victory against entitlement. Robert came back to us, his tone much gentler now. Sir, ma'am, again, we're truly sorry. We'll have her removed from future flights and file a full report. You'll also receive compensation for the incident. Emily smiled faintly. That's not necessary, she said. But I met his gaze. File the report anyway. He nodded, understanding more than I said aloud. As the plane finally began to taxi again, the calm returned. The engines roared, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the golden daylight poured in through the window once more, the same window that had sparked all this chaos. Emily leaned back, her head resting against the seat. I took her hand gently, feeling the warmth return to her fingers. You okay? I asked softly. She nodded. I will be, but what a way to start the day. I smiled, though my mind was elsewhere, already replaying every second of the incident, not with anger but with intent. That woman thought she could throw coffee and walk away. She had no idea who she'd just messed with, because in a few short hours her name, her behavior, and her arrogance would reach the highest levels of the airline's internal system, the same airline I happened to own. And justice, I decided, would not only be served, it would be delivered personally. The plane hummed steadily again as it lifted into the bright afternoon sky. The turbulence had passed, and so had the storm that Karen, the coffee-throwing tornado, had unleashed before takeoff. Yet, even as the engines roared smoothly beneath us, a strange silence hung in the cabin. People were polite but tense, whispering about what they had just witnessed. Some scrolled through the footage they'd captured, others shook their heads in disbelief. Emily sat beside me, her cardigan still faintly stained despite the napkins and cleaning wipes the attendants had offered. She looked exhausted but composed. There was something deeply graceful about her calm, the way she managed to smile, even after being humiliated in front of an entire plane. I really don't want to make this a big deal, she said softly, looking out the window. It's over now. Let's just forget it. I took a deep breath, staring at the clouds outside, endless, white, and peaceful. It's not about making it a big deal, I replied quietly. It's about what's right. She turned to me, her eyes full of kindness. You've always been protective, but sometimes people like that, they're just not worth your energy. Maybe she was right, but I couldn't let it go, not because of pride, but because of what she had endured. The woman had thrown scalding liquid at her face, insulted her publicly, and walked around like she was untouchable. I'd seen arrogance before, in boardrooms, business meetings, and billionaire circles, but rarely had I seen it so casually cruel. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the head flight attendant, Robert, returned to check on us. His professional tone was softer now, his posture less formal. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, he began, I wanted to personally apologize again for everything that happened earlier. The captain has filed an incident report, and airport security is handling the situation on the ground. Thank you, Emily said warmly. You've all been so kind. Robert nodded. We'll also be offering a full refund for this flight and additional compensation from our corporate office. I know that doesn't erase what happened, but I raised a hand gently to stop him. That won't be necessary, I said, but I do want you to make sure that woman never boards another one of our planes again. He blinked. Our planes? I reached into my jacket pocket and handed him a sleek black business card embossed with gold lettering. His eyes dropped to it, reading the logo Aeroglobe Aviation Group. Beneath it was my name, Ethan Wilson, founder and CEO. Robert froze for half a second, then looked back at me, visibly startled. Sir, I didn't realize. I know, I said calmly, and that's good. I don't expect special treatment when I travel, but today, something happened that crossed every line. The color drained slightly from his face as he nodded. Understood, Mr. Wilson. I'll make sure corporate security gets your direct report immediately. Emily sighed softly beside me. Ethan, she whispered, you really don't have to. I smiled faintly and turned to her. Sweetheart, you've always told me that if you have the power to fix something unfair, you should. This isn't revenge, it's responsibility. Robert, now more composed, cleared his throat. I'll make sure she's permanently banned from all Aeroglobe flights. Sir, I'll also notify the captain that the owner is on board. Please don't, I said quickly. I don't want attention. I'm just another passenger today. He nodded again, his respect now mixed with awe. Of course, sir, and for what it's worth, I'm glad you're the one who owns this airline. After he left, Emily turned back to the window. You didn't tell me you'd planned to fly one of your own planes today, she said teasingly. I chuckled. I didn't plan to. It's one of our newer acquisitions. I thought it'd be nice to see how the team runs it firsthand. Well, she said with a wry smile. You've certainly got an unfiltered look at your customer experience. Her humor lightened the tension in my chest, and I laughed softly. That's one way to put it. The flight continued quietly after that. A few passengers who had witnessed the earlier chaos now looked at us differently, not because they knew who I was, but because they'd seen how calmly we handled it. A young couple across the aisle offered Emily a chocolate bar and a shy smile. You didn't deserve that, the woman said gently. Thank you, Emily replied, touched. That means a lot. By the time the attendants brought around lunch trays, the cabin felt peaceful again. The sunlight outside had brightened into a soft, golden glow, reflecting off the wings like liquid fire. Emily leaned against my shoulder as we ate, and for a brief while it almost felt like the morning's madness had never happened. But halfway through the flight, my phone buzzed with an alert, a direct message from my corporate communications team. It read, Incident report filed by Flight Crew 4723 regarding disruptive passenger. Security footage verified, requesting executive direction for disciplinary and legal escalation. I typed back a simple response. Proceed. Begin with no-fly blacklist. Forward to legal for review. Confirm she's escorted by authorities upon arrival. It wasn't out of spite. It was about accountability. People needed to learn that cruelty, no matter how small, carried consequences. Emily glanced at my phone and sighed. You're already working. I smiled, sliding the phone face down on the tray, just making sure things are handled properly. Then, I'm all yours. She smiled softly, resting her head back against the seat. That's all I want. The rest of the flight was smooth. The air was clear, the sky endless and blue. The attendants treated us with quiet deference now, though they never said a word about my position. Professionalism, I respected that. As we began our descent into San Diego, Robert returned once more. Mr. Wilson, he said quietly. The airport authority has confirmed that the passenger was detained and will be processed for in-flight misconduct. They also verified that her behavior was recorded by multiple passengers. Good, I said simply. Make sure our customer relations team doesn't reach out to her. No apologies, no compensation. She doesn't get to play the victim after what she did. Robert nodded firmly. Understood, sir. Emily reached over and touched my hand gently. You've done enough, she said softly. Let's just go home. Okay. I looked at her, the way the sunlight framed her face, the calm resilience in her eyes, and I nodded. Okay. When the plane landed, the passengers began clapping lightly, a tradition I'd always found charming. As we taxied to the gate, I noticed passengers still whispering about the earlier incident, sharing clips and shaking their heads. As we stood to deplaned, the young couple across the aisle smiled again at Emily. "You handled that like a saint," the woman said. Emily laughed lightly. "I just didn't want to ruin everyone's flight." The man grinned. "Well, you made the rest of us proud." We thanked them and stepped into the jet bridge, the warm California sunlight spilling in through the glass. For most passengers, the ordeal had ended when the plane touched the ground. But for me, it was only the beginning, because the woman who had thrown coffee at my wife had no idea. She'd started a chain reaction, one that would ripple through corporate offices, legal teams, and airport authorities across 62 airports worldwide. She thought she could insult, humiliate, and get away with it. But she had just picked a fight with the man who owned the sky she flew through. The next morning, San Diego was drenched in sunlight. The sky was clear. The waves of the Pacific shimmered like silver glass, and the city buzzed with the familiar calm of coastal life. Emily and I had spent the night at the hotel attached to the airport, a decision made mostly to rest after the exhausting flight. But while Emily slept peacefully, I found myself sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, replaying every detail of the day before. Karen's voice still echoed in my mind, that shrill, entitled tone. The way she had looked down at my wife as if she were less than human. People like her didn't just need to be stopped, they needed to learn. And not through anger or revenge, but through consequence. At exactly 8 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was my assistant, Nora. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson," she said, her tone brisk and clear. "I received the report from Flight 4723. Airport security confirmed the passenger's removal, and our legal team has reviewed the footage." "Good," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "What's the preliminary action?" "She's already been placed on Aeroglobe's permanent no-fly list," Nora continued. "Our database has synced that information with all 62 partner airports under our network. She won't be able to book or enter any of our affiliated terminals again." I smiled faintly. "Efficient, as always, Nora." "There's more," she added. "The footage has gone viral. A passenger posted it on social media late last night. Over 3 million views already. People are calling her the Coffee Karen." I sighed. "Of course they are." "She's already issued a public statement claiming she was provoked," Nora said, her tone almost amused. "But witnesses and our own staff reports say otherwise. What would you like to do next?" I leaned back in the chair, watching a plane take off in the distance. "One of my planes, gleaming under the sun." "Proceed with legal action," I said finally. "Assaulting a passenger and delaying a flight are both offenses. I want her held accountable legally, not publicly. I'm not interested in humiliating her further." "Understood," Nora said. "I'll have our attorneys coordinate with airport security to file charges." "Anything else?" "Yes," I said after a pause. "Make sure every crew member from that flight gets a personal commendation, especially Robert and Jessica. They handled a volatile situation with calm and professionalism. I want them recognized company-wide." There was a brief silence on the line, then a smile in Nora's voice. "Consider it done, sir." When I hung up, I felt something shift inside me, not satisfaction but a quiet sense of order being restored. The chaos she had caused in that cabin would echo far less loudly now. Justice wasn't about punishment. It was about balance. A few hours later, Emily joined me on the balcony, her hair still tousled from sleep. "You're up early," she said, taking a seat beside me. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Too much on my mind." She sipped her tea and gave me a knowing smile. "You took care of it, didn't you?" I didn't need to answer, she already knew. "I just made sure she won't do something like that again," I said quietly. Emily sighed. "I still think she's probably sitting somewhere blaming the world instead of herself." "Maybe," I said, "but now the world won't have to deal with her, at least not from one of my planes." She laughed softly. "You're unbelievable sometimes." "I learned from you," I said, smiling. "You taught me how to stay calm. I just added the consequences." Later that day, we visited one of our smaller terminals outside San Diego. It was part of my post-acquisition rounds, routine inspections to ensure smooth management transitions. The staff didn't know who I was until the manager saw my credentials. Suddenly, there was a quiet ripple of recognition through the building. The manager, a man named Lucas, approached nervously. "Mr. Wilson, we didn't expect you here today." "I like surprises," I said, shaking his hand. "I just wanted to see how the operation is running." He nodded eagerly. "Of course, everything's in order. Though, I must say yesterday's incident caused quite a stir among the staff." I raised an eyebrow. "You heard about that already?" He chuckled. "Sir, every airline employee in the country has heard about it. The videos everywhere. People are calling it a lesson in karma." I couldn't help but smile. "Well, I suppose there's some truth in that." As we walked through the terminal, employees greeted me warmly, their respect genuine. I spoke briefly with a few attendants about safety training and handling difficult passengers. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, said, "We were proud of how our team handled that situation, sir. It reminded all of us why professionalism matters, even when passengers don't show it." Her words stayed with me long after we left. Professionalism. That was the difference between dignity and chaos, between grace and ego. Emily embodied it every day, and now I realized my employees did too. That afternoon, Nora called again. "Sir, there's been a development," she said. I glanced at Emily, who was flipping through a travel magazine beside me. "Go on." The passenger, Karen Doyle, has issued a second statement. This time, it's more serious. She's threatening to sue for defamation and emotional distress because of the viral video. I chuckled softly. Defamation. She defamed herself on camera. "That's what our lawyers said," Nora replied. "She's hired a small-time attorney, but there's no real case. We've already prepared a response." "Let her try," I said calmly. "The footage is clear, the witness reports are consistent, and the law is on our side. Just make sure Emily's name stays out of everything. She doesn't need to be dragged into this." "Already taken care of," Nora assured me. "You know, sir, this might actually boost the airline's reputation. People online are praising Aeroglobe for protecting its passengers." I smiled. Sometimes, doing the right thing does that. That evening, Emily and I went for a walk along the beach. The sunset painted the water in gold and amber, the waves lapping gently at our feet. She looked peaceful again, her laughter returning as the sea breeze played with her hair. "Feels good to breathe fresh air," she said, closing her eyes. "Better than airplane air," I teased. She nudged me with her shoulder. "Promise me something," she said suddenly. "Anything. If you ever find yourself in another situation like that, don't let anger make the choices for you. I know you wanted to protect me, and I love you for that. But sometimes kindness, even when undeserved, is the stronger thing." I looked at her, then nodded slowly. "You're right, but I think this time, justice and kindness met halfway." She smiled, satisfied. "Then I'm proud of you." As we watched the last light fade into the horizon, I thought about the woman who had started it all, sitting somewhere, probably furious at a world that refused to bend for her. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward her realizing that she wasn't as untouchable as she believed, because in the end, the sky doesn't belong to the loudest or the rudest. It belongs to those who respect it, and the people who share it. And as I stood there beside Emily, the waves crashing softly at our feet, I knew that what had begun with spilled coffee had turned into something far greater, a reminder that even in the clouds, there's a line between pride and decency, and that line, no matter how high you fly, should never be crossed. Weeks passed since the coffee incident that had shaken the skies and gone viral across every social platform imaginable. Life for Emily and me had finally settled back into its gentle rhythm, quiet mornings, calm evenings, and the simple joy of flying without drama. Yet, beneath that peace, I could feel the faint hum of unfinished business. Despite the legal closure of the case and Aeroglobe's official statement, the story had taken on a life of its own. News anchors debated the meaning of respect and privilege. Commentators labeled the event a symbol of modern entitlement. And while I'd done my best to stay out of the spotlight, fate, it seemed, wasn't finished writing our story. One crisp morning, I received an unexpected call from an unfamiliar number. I nearly ignored it until something in me, perhaps curiosity, made me answer. "Mr. Wilson," a hesitant female voice said. "This is Karen Doyle." For a moment, silence filled the line. My instinct was to hang up, but something about the way she said her name, quiet, almost trembling, stopped me. "I assume this isn't another complaint," I said evenly. "No," she replied softly. "It's an apology." I sat back in my chair, stunned. "Go on," she took a shaky breath. "I know I have no right to call you, but I needed to say this myself. When the video went viral, I was furious. I blamed everyone but me. I told myself I was the victim, but then, I watched the footage again. I saw myself through other people's eyes." Her voice broke slightly. "I looked awful. I didn't just spill coffee. I spilled my own anger onto someone who didn't deserve it. I saw your wife sitting there, calm, kind, while I was out of control. It hit me like a punch. I've been carrying that shame ever since." I didn't speak. For the first time, she sounded human, stripped of ego, stripped of arrogance. "I've started therapy," she continued quietly. "I lost my job because of the incident, but maybe that's what I needed, a reset. I can't undo what I did, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to change. Please tell your wife that I'm sorry, truly." For a moment, I felt the tension leave my shoulders. "Thank you," I said finally. "That takes courage to say." "I'll tell her." She hesitated. "You don't have to forgive me, but I hope one day, maybe you'll understand that I'm not the same person who boarded that flight." "I already do," I said softly, and ended the call. When I told Emily later that evening, she was quiet for a long time. Then she smiled faintly. "People really can change, can't they?" "Sometimes," I said, "but only when they finally see the truth about themselves." She nodded, taking my hand. Then maybe that was the real ending to all this. I thought it was until 2 days later, when Aeroglobe received an invitation from the National Aviation Council. They wanted me to give a keynote address about ethics, empathy, and professionalism in the skies. The irony wasn't lost on me. What started as a confrontation 30,000 feet above ground had now become a symbol of something much larger, how respect could change the entire tone of human interaction. On the day of the speech, the hall was filled with pilots, flight attendants, journalists, and travelers. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and the energy in the air felt charged with expectation. As I stepped onto the stage, I caught Emily's reassuring smile from the front row. I began simply. Not long ago, a small incident on a flight captured the world's attention, I said, my voice steady. A cup of coffee, a few harsh words, and a moment of arrogance. That's all it took to spark outrage across millions of screens. But beneath the drama and the headlines was a deeper truth about who we are when no one is watching. The room was silent. That day I saw two kinds of people. I continued. One who believed respect must be earned, and another who believed it should be given freely. What happened after that, the confrontation, the fallout, even the legal consequences were all just reflections of those two beliefs colliding mid-air. I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. But this story didn't end in anger. It ended in understanding. The woman involved reached out to apologize, not because the world demanded it, but because she finally saw herself clearly, and that's something we should all strive for. Not to be perfect, but to be self-aware enough to change. A soft murmur ran through the audience. I could see the flight attendants nodding, the pilots exchanging thoughtful looks. I've built my life around the skies, I said, but I've learned that altitude means nothing if humanity doesn't come with it. Whether we're on a plane or on the ground, we owe each other decency. Not for reputation, not for approval, just because it's right. When I finished, the hall erupted in applause. But it wasn't the thunderous kind that follows a spectacle. It was the steady, heartfelt applause of people who understood. After the speech, several reporters approached me for interviews, but I declined most of them. I didn't want the story to be about me. I wanted it to belong to everyone who'd ever witnessed or suffered from disrespect and chosen grace instead. That night, Emily and I stood once more on the airport balcony, watching another fleet of Aeroglobe jets take off into the dusk. The golden lights reflected off the wings like fireflies against the sky. You did good today, she said quietly. So did you, I replied. You're the reason I handled it the way I did. You kept me grounded, she smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. It's funny, isn't it? How one bad moment turned into something good. It's never the moment that defines us, I said. It's what we do after. For a while, we said nothing, just watching the planes disappear into the horizon. Symbols of movement, change, and second chances. Somewhere out there I imagined Karen sitting quietly by her window, maybe watching the same sunset, trying to become someone better. And that thought, strangely enough, made the world feel a little lighter. As the night sky deepened, I took Emily's hand. You ready for our next flight? She laughed softly, as long as there's no coffee involved. We both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes when the storm has finally passed. And as the stars began to glimmer above, I realized the sky, vast, endless, and forgiving, had room for all of us. Because redemption, like flight, begins when you choose to rise again.